saved our lives, but love got lost. Lord, it came through. Continental disaster.
Hey, yo, everybody. Welcome to our little experiment here. So what I'm going to be doing is walking everybody through a little design that we've come up with Iconik here. And kind of starting from the top. This might take a while. We may succeed. We may fail. I don't know. If you guys have questions, throw them into the chat. If you hate the music I'm listening to in the background, hey, tell me if you want to listen to something. That's cool too, man. I'm going to try to be explaining things as I go. And with me, as always, is the faithful dog. So every now and then the dog will get it pet while good things happen, and hopefully get pet more when bad things happen. We'll figure that out as we go. So, first and foremost, I think it's important to kind of talk about what we're going to try to do today. So, the goal of this whole thing is to kind of show off how APIs can work, how we can kind of implement them and build something that's maybe not baked into the product itself. So what I've actually got going on here, and we will kick over to my screen, is a little whiteboard. And what I got asked not too long ago was, hey, would there be a cool way within Iconik, or a way that would be possible to limit some of the external sharing capabilities that happen based on users or metadata or something along those lines? So I thought about it and said, yeah, I think that's totally possible. So what we're going to do today is we've got Iconik here over on the side, and Iconik has these things called webhooks. And webhooks allow you to subscribe from different things happening within Iconik. And then we are going to send that webhook over to a Google Cloud function to do some computing for us. So that's where we're going to start talking to our API and a couple of other APIs. And what we're going to functionally do at this point is subscribe here to new shares being made. And we're going to, in the world of Iconik, make a new metadata group or view. And inside that view, it's going to be admins only access. And it's just going to be really simple. Can share this asset. And it's just going to be a Boolean. So if people are going to try to share an asset, they're going to be able to go and click share. They have general share rights. But if that asset is flagged, what we want to do is catch that share as soon as it happens and then delete it. So we're going to go to our cloud function, and our cloud function over here is going to do a couple of things. It's going to check that metadata, and then it's going to remove the share if it meets the metrics we set. And then it's going to do one other thing, is it's going to talk to a third-party API over here in the world of Slack. And what I'm going to do is toss some more information over to Slack's API, hopefully, if we do this right. And that's just going to be a log of illegal shares. Or maybe legal shares too. Who knows, right? So we'll figure that out as we go. So I think first and foremost, I'm going to primarily be writing all of this stuff in Python. The environment that I'm using here is going to be, and Vitaly, yeah, Google Cloud is GCP. Yep. So I'm going to be using a couple of basic tools within my world. Obviously, I got a browser up so I can take a look at Iconik and that sort of thing. I'm using Visual Studio Code for all of my actual code writing, my text editor. I find it to work pretty well. Tons of options out there that you can use. And then I'm also going to be using Iconik itself and some of the functionality within that to do these sorts of things. Most of the stuff's going to be written in Python. We're going to be using the requests library in Python. It is Python requests. Is that Python? Nope, that's not it. Requests. So this is a really great library for making functionally HTTPS calls really, really easily between different applications. And we can import this right into a Google Cloud function. You could use a Lambda function as well if you wanted to, whatever the case may be, to be able to have this kind of crosstalk happening pretty quickly. So I think first thing we got to do is kind of show off what the heck happens when you do shares within Iconik. So I'm going to go hop over to Iconik here, and I'm going to find a quick clip here. And I am going to just simply go up to my gear menu here, hit share. I'm just going to send that to my email address. And when I click send, this is going to, in the realm of Iconik, it's actually going to create what we call a share. Close a couple of these windows here. You can see that I create a share. I create it with myself, my personal email address. So don't go crazy with that one, guys. Please don't sign me up for gross stuff. And that then functionally is going to be where I receive this. So I'm going to pop open my mail really quick here and check my mail. And we can see that that asset has been shared with me. So this takes me right to that share. And if I actually refresh this over in Iconik now, we'll see actually, takes a second for it to show up in the that it's going to be seen. Actually, I haven't clicked the link yet, so I lied. Until I click that link in that that mail, it's not actually going to tag that. But now I'm in limited access mode. I can only download it, and I can only make comments and the things that I set for this particular video clip here. So let's close a couple of windows here first. And I'm going to show you guys some tricks, too, as far as when we start to manipulate the API within Iconik of kind of how to sneak and steal some of the information that's happening if we want to manipulate things in a little bit by using our developer consoles within Safari or Chrome or whatever you might want to do. We're not going to get to that quite yet. We're going to still plow through some of this other stuff here. For now, I will quit my mail, so it's bothering me. So I think the first thing we've got to do here is close developer mode. And we're going to create a new view inside of Iconik that is our admin view so that we can have that little toggle that we want to track when things are safe to be encoded or shared and when they're not safe to be shared, right? So I'm going to hop over here, admin in Iconik, and then hop into metadata and do views. And I'm going to make a new view. And this view is going to be share restriction. And I'm just going to make one new metadata field as well. I'm going to go to metadata field, and I'm going to call this cannot be shared. And I'll say share no. Make it a little easier programmatically. And I'm going to make this a yes, no, or a Boolean. And say create. Hop back over into my views, which I just made my share view, share restriction. I'm going to add that field to that view. And then within this particular view, I'm going to now restrict permissions for everyone to only be able to read and see what the status is of that so that they have the opportunity to not do something illegal if they look at it and see that somebody's flagged that. And I'm also going to say that my, let's see, we'll go to my metadata manager group also has write access to this. So anybody that's in that group can also modify the metadata that lives inside that specific field now. So now that I've done all that stuff, if I hop back over into Iconik now and we go back to my little view here and take a look at metadata, we're going to see that there's a share restriction view now, and this has a really simple field in it. It's called cannot be shared. I can turn that on. I can turn that off. Easy enough. And we're going to use this as the rule to define whether or not our share should actually be shared or not. And what we're not going to be able to do in this case is actually restrict the share from growing out, but we can immediately catch the share happening and actually remove the share permissions and log it and know who broke the rule, basically, when this happens. So the next thing I've got to do, now that I've got kind of this little thing set up, is I need to attach a webhook to sharing. So I'm going to go into my admin panel here. I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to go to webhooks. And I'm going to use a handy little tool that I love to use for doing webhook development. It's called webhook.site. And what webhook.site does is it literally just gives you a URL and then collects the webhooks that you point it to. So I'm going to copy that URL to the clipboard. I'm going to go over here and say for all assets, anytime a share is created, send me the information to that endpoint. And what this is functionally done now is anytime I do a new share, now I'm going to actually get a webhook right in this little web page here with the information about that share. So let's hop back over to our little clip that we were working on earlier. And I'm going to make a new share on this. I'm going to send it to myself again, just to create a new share. Here you go. Hit send. And now what we're going to see is that we just got a notification with all of the information about that object and the share. So we can see all the information about the share itself that came through, the ID of the share itself, all the info we functionally need to start manipulating that share. And what we're eventually going to do is we're going to point this at our cloud function. But before we even get into the cloud function side of things, we're going to rapid prototype a little bit here. We're going to build, some logic and talk to the API a little bit and make sure that we've got some, something working properly. So cool. Now we've created a share. Now we got the API or the webhooks sending JSON over to an endpoint at this point. So now I've got a test event that I can start playing with. And all I'm going to do is just to copy this, go over to VS Code, save it on my desktop, and call it example share.json. Why am I doing this? Just so that I have this to look at really quickly as I'm starting to manipulate things programmatically. Because if I don't, well, I'm going to have to keep running new shares every time. That gets pretty annoying, that sort of thing. So let's go back to our little diagram here. Where is it? OmniGraffle. So we've created our little share and we've created our view. We've now created our webhook. So now we've got to dive a little bit deeper and we've got to start using the Iconik API with the information the webhook sent us and figure out if that metadata is good or not. There's a couple of things we got to do there. We have to be familiar with the Iconik API and how to get that information. So I'm going to hop back into Iconik here in a new window, and I'm going to go to developer docs, and I'm going to go to APIs and REST API reference guide, and we are going to look into assets, I think is where shares live. And this is where search for share. Yep, there we go. Nope, that's not the one I want. Shares. Nope, not there. Object type, object ID, shares. Cool. So now I can use the information that I got from my webhook potentially to look at the information from the share. And what I'm going to do is just hop back over to VS Code really quickly. I'm going to copy the object ID, which is the asset ID here, right? Copy that. And say this is assets and object ID, and I hit execute. And if I did this right, yep, 200. Oh, I did something wrong. Yep, there we go. Nope, I did it wrong. See, this is the joy of doing things live, right? Is it asset? Shares, yeah. Hit a list of shares on an asset. That is my object ID. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let's hop back over here and make sure I have the right. Oh, that's the share ID. See, I'm already doing stupid stuff. So the asset ID itself, the share ID is different than the asset ID. So if I hop back over to my my API here and paste this in, hit run. Now it gives me a list of all of the shares. And what you will notice here is that the ID, my baseboard manager up and going. This ID right here, the C26BBA, whatever the heck it is what the webhook sent, and that's the ID for the share. In this case, what I actually wanted was the object ID, not just the ID. The ID in this case was the share ID itself. The object ID is the parent, essentially. That's the asset itself that I'm looking at. But now you can see with the API in our docs, you got back all that information, and it returned the exact same information. So now let's look in the docs for shares and see if I can, like, do stuff, right? Well, I want to kill the share, right? Eventually, that's going to be a bit of code that I'm going to have to write. So let's make sure this works. So I go and I say it's assets, and object ID is our object ID, and our share ID is back here again. Where is it? There. Copy. And paste that back into here and hit run. And I get a 204, which is all good. And now if I hop back into Iconic and refresh, look at that. One of the shares is gone. So just by kind of using the API, I was able to now manipulate this share pretty quickly. You know, I mean, we're only 15 minutes into this thing, and I'm already starting to get stuff done with the API. So now that we know that that's the right endpoint that we want to work with here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab that particular endpoint. I'm just going to copy this into another notepad because I know what I'm going to need it for later. Hop over to VS Code, make a new file, say delete shares, and then I'm just going to put that there so I know that that's the API endpoint that I'm going to call to later. Now, the other thing we need to do is we want to look up that metadata to decide whether we want to delete that share or not, right? So that's going to be hopping back to the metadata, and this time we're going to go into our metadata class and find, I think it's actually the second to last one because I've used this one enough to where I kind of, whoops, scroll down here. Yep, so I can get metadata by object type, object ID, and view ID. And remember, view IDs in Iconic, if you're not aware of this, view IDs are how you access metadata. That's because they have access controls on them, right? So remember earlier, we went in and created the view, and our share view, we put ACLs on that. So if your API user is not a user that is in the media manager or metadata manager group, they're actually not going to be able to manipulate this metadata. They'd only be able to get access. So let's hop back to the API again. And I'm going to say, hey, let's try this out. And my object type is going to be assets again. And object ID is going to be something else. Oh, I just deleted it. So let's make a new share real quick. So I have something to work with here. Go back here again. Make a new share again. Do it to myself again. Hit go. And now we hop back over to our webhook.site here. And now we got that new share information it just tossed across. And here's my object ID. So that's the actual asset itself, right? Oh, sorry. No. Yeah, that's the actual asset itself. No. Object ID down here in the data is the asset. So under data, object ID is the asset. Hop back over to my API, paste that in. And now we got to get the view ID that we're looking for too. So to get the view ID, it's pretty easy. You can just log into Iconic, go to admin, go to metadata, go to your views, find your view, and there's this little button over here on the side, and that will grab your UUID and just copy it to your clipboard so that now you can hop back over to that other window, hit go, and hit execute, right? And now we can see that we got the response back, and it was a good response. Said, hey, response body was all this stuff, but here's my share no field, and the value of it is true. So this is the call that I need to make in my cloud function to figure out if I want to act on this particular item, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this because this is just a response. And actually, I'm going to copy this as well as the request URL because we just need to keep notes of what we need to do. So check metadata is that URL. And then our response example here, I'm just going to copy that over too, just so I have it to look at later. And I'm just going to put no response up here because so I don't forget that there is no response. Just check for 04. Okay. So, done all that sort of stuff. Now we're at a point where we've pretty much got all the information we need to at least do the decision-making tree and the delete. So let's start writing a little bit of code here. So first thing I'm going to do, make a new text file. I'm going to import requests because that's our library to talk to the Iconik API. And I'm going to also, we're going to do this in a relatively low budget way. I'm going to just say my input data in this case equals, and then I'm literally going to copy and paste my webhook in here so that I don't have to actually start implementing anything quite yet. This is just, so I hop back to my webhook.site. Right there. Grab that because this is this is the input to our script, right? This is what our script will be receiving when we actually kind of deploy this and get a little further upstream. So I'm just gonna make that. I'm gonna save this really quickly too, and I'm just gonna throw it on my desktop and call it hackathon.py. And the reason I save that is because VS Code, if you save it and put the proper extension on it, actually starts to do contextual autocompletes for you and formatting and all sorts of nice stuff along those. So the next thing I need to do is use this information to figure out if we are going to act on this. So the very, very first thing I want to do is basically build a couple of like qualification rules. And what I normally do in this case is webhooks come in unauthenticated, but they do come in with some unique information, specifically the system domain ID. So what I'm going to actually do is my first little thing here is going to be build a function that checks validity of the incoming call. So I'm going to do check validity. Oh, and I also need to import JSON because we're going to be working with a JSON here. And check validity, or the way functions work in Python is this is just reusable code. And you can pass any number of arguments into it and then very quickly with one line call this. So what I'm going to do is make my input here is going to be called webhook, and essentially when I get the webhook, ultimately I'll pass it to this and then be able to use it. And all I'm going to do is, because that webhook is going to be a JSON object, I'm going to then say, okay, if webhook and bracket system domain ID does not equal my domain ID here, turn false, which basically comes back and says, hey, this thing is not from our domain. And I'm actually going to do one other thing here. I'm going to do a try statement around this. Because if bad webhooks get sent to here as well, I just want to ignore those. Because if it doesn't have this key, the system domain ID key, if some other system magically figures out your webhook receiver site and starts sending it bad data, we want to very quickly just dump out of that and make sure that it's not going to actually manipulate that. So I'm going to say accept here, which is, and then I'm just going to return false. And this is not the right way to do this. The right way would be to actually accept with an error and properly trap this. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But right now we're just like rapid prototyping. We're trying to get stuff working and see if we can see results, right? So that's my first little simple function. My next one is going to be to check the status of that metadata. So I'm going to say def check metadata. And again, I'm just going to pass it the webhook that I got in. So in this case, I'm going to take that webhook in, and I'm going to get the metadata on our actual ID or on our asset at that point, right? So I'm gonna make a call to the Iconik API. So I'm gonna do r equals requests.get, and let's dive into this a little bit first, actually. So if we go take a look back at the Iconik API here, and we looked at the data that we got out here, you can see that it is a get, right? So when you're working with REST APIs, there's only a handful of different methods. These are what's called methods. You got get, you got put, you got post, you got patch, you got delete. There might be another one that I'm not even aware of because I didn't go to school for this stuff, but that's kind of the the generals. Gets are essentially for getting data and not for manipulating anything server side. So you're just making a request to get information back. And so in this case, that's what we want to do. We want to get our metadata back. And I'm also going to go here really quickly, and we're going to set up some just dummy data to make life easier. And actually, yeah, we'll just create a new webhook or a new app key really quickly so we can use it. I'm going to go over back to Iconik here and go to admin and go to settings, application tokens, because what we need to do is we need some way for Iconik to talk to our function. We need to be able to talk back to Iconik from our function, which means we need some form of authentication. So what I'm going to go do is find a user that's in my system, or actually go into my metadata manager group and look for the different users that are in that group, because they have the rights that are necessary to at least read this at this point. And what I'm also going to do is make sure that there's some roles associated with this group, because they're going to need to manipulate the shares as well. So I'm going to kick into advanced view here. I'm going to type object or shares, and I'm going to say can read shares, can write shares, and can delete object shares. So basically, this users in this group now can manipulate sharing by enabling all this stuff. I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to use Joe Producer as my user here. So I'm going to go admin, settings, application tokens, and I'm going to call this Hackathon share off. And then I'm going to choose Joe Producer as the user that this runs as and hit add. And that's going to create a new ID. Oh, and Michael's saying you have head and options methods also, which typically never get used. And that, yeah, that is a pretty ugly smiley. I don't know how to... this is my first Twitch stream, guys, so if you guys are heavy into the Twitch stuff and you know how to build custom emotes, I'm all for it. You can slap a like or a sub or click Twitch Prime. I don't know. There's a bunch of things. There's words that I'm saying that I don't know what. Yeah, so now we've created this auth, and this is our app ID. So I'm going to copy this really quickly, hop back over to VS Code, and make a new variable called app ID, and I'm just going to paste that in there. I'm going to make a new one, which is our auth token. Think of this as like the password. And I'm going to create this as well. So I'm going to go create new, hit copy, and click copy that. Hop back over, paste that in. Boom. Now we have some authentication we can do. And then the other thing I'm going to do is the way Iconik does authentication is through passing that information through the headers. And you can actually see this If you take a look at the curl that happened when I ran these API calls from the docs earlier, you can see it actually created these headers: accept, application JSON, app ID, and auth token. Right. So I need to create some header. I'm just going to create a shortcut so I don't have to type out all this crap every time I want to run a call for the rest of the day. And I'm going to go back to VS Code and say headers equals, and it is app dash ID colon app ID. So I'm passing it the variable for that, or the value of that variable. And then I'm going to say auth token and token. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Sometimes I forget this, so I'm going to double check it. App with lowercase p and uppercase there, and auth token. Yep, camel case there. Whoops. And so now we're good. So now we can actually start to make some API calls inside of our programming, right? So I'm going to do a request get. And what this is going to do is go, I'm going to do one other little shortcut here to make life easier. I'm going to call this Iconik URL, and that's going to be our API endpoint. So it's app.iconic.io/API/, and then that way I'm not going to have to type all that stuff in every time I make a call moving. So, who's texting me? Anybody important? No, it's my dad. You don't need to know what he's telling me. I mean, he's telling me that he's shipping me things. They're shipping things for my mom for a surprise birthday present. We're not gonna focus on that for the remainder of our session here. Maybe we will. Who knows? If the truck shows up, I may have to go to. That's the beauty of live, guys. So we've got this little shortcut here, and the way requests works is it's requests is the library, and then it's the method, right? And so we talked about that earlier: get, put, post, patch, whatever it is. Our API docs actually tell us what those are when we're looking at them, right? Here it says get, put, delete, whatever that is. That exact same word is what's going to be used in our requests call. And now I'm going to throw in Iconik URL, and I'll do a little plus, and now I'm going to put in the actual endpoint of our metadata that we need to include. And I kept that over here, right? So it is metadata, v1, assets, all this stuff, right? So I'm just going to copy this, paste it into here, but these are actual values, and we need to replace those with the values we got from our webhook. So I'm going to take that out, put a little plus, and then put in webhook. And this one is going to be data and object ID. Plus. And what that basically said is this is using the JSON library. This is a JSON object in the world of Python. This right here, I'm going to actually have to turn into JSON. So maybe I do that and say my webhook equals JSON.loads input data. Cool. So now that I've done that, when I pass this later, this is actually going to be a JSON object, and then JSON objects can be iterated against. Now, in this case, this is our webhook's never going to have multiple objects. You can see that this is just a dict and not a list. Anytime you see these little things, those are lists. That means you might have to loop through in some cases to figure out which one it is that you want to work with. But in our case, we are working at the top level, and then we are looking inside the data object, which is its own dict. And I think I accidentally moved something. There we go. Its own dictionary. And then inside there is object ID, right? So we did data, then object ID. That gave us the actual object ID that's going to be sent in. And then the other thing we need to do is put in our view ID. And this is one of those things we can just throw into the variables, and we can call this, we'll just call it view ID. And back up here in our little variables section, I'm going to go view ID equals, and I'm going to go copy that again from Iconik. So hop back over, admin, metadata, use, share, copy. Hop back over here. Boom. Oh, got to put that in quotes. So now, essentially what's happening is our little script here is going to run, and it's going to get this information back if everything works well. And what I'm going to do is make a little... another thing that's worth noting when you're dealing with REST APIs here, if we hop back to the docs, you'll notice when we ran this, down here you get this code, right? And in our docs, we say, you know, there's various codes that come back, you know, bad request, invalid token, whatever. So I'm going to check and make sure that the code is a 200 before I do anything. Because if it's not, that means that my REST call itself was just bad. And then I can sniff that out later. Right now, I'm just going to make sure it's good. All right, so we'll hop back into our code. Oops. There. Say if r.status code equals 200. Which means R is the object that comes back from the request, and it has a lot of fun capabilities in it. Again, this is using that requests library, so highly recommend you kind of noodle the docs on that. It's not horribly in-depth. It's super easy to use, so once you kind of get working with it, you can go to town. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to just print this out so that we can see it. So I'm going to print r.json, which is... well, actually, I'm going to do print JSON dumps, which I'm converting my JSON object in Python into a string that's easy to see. r.json, which is the JSON object that comes back from the response. And then I'm going to make it pretty. Whoops. Indent equals 4 and sort key. Just because now it's going to look good. And now I'm ready to run my first bit of code. And VS Code has its own nice little console here, so I can use that, or I can hop over into my terminal. I'm going to use the terminal because I think it might be a little easier for people to see because the VS Code one's super tiny. And I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to go Python, hackathon.py, and run it. And I did something wrong. Oh, I didn't. So it says, hey, on line 40, you had a syntax error. It's because I forgot to put the colon at the end here. So I just screwed up. Very common. We're going to get a lot of those today, guys. Put the colon, hop back, run it again. And what did I do wrong here? Oh, I didn't actually run anything, but that's a syntax error. So indentation error. Oh, yeah, no, that all seems right. A why is that? Oh, I don't have a so what I'm doing here is just saying if... Oh, that's why. And we're not even running this yet, but the script won't run until I actually have correct syntax in it. But what I basically did is I had a wrong block here. This was supposed to be tabbed in, and then I actually didn't have a return function at all. And now I've got, double equals. See, stupid little things. It's double equals is a valuation. Equals actually sets a variable. So up here, you can see I did a bunch of equals. Down here, I have to do double equals to make that work. Now it should hopefully run. Yep. And what did I do? Name null is not defined. Message type. What did I do wrong? Oh, I didn't actually send it a message. Right? Oh, I copied in. Yeah. Null does not count in Python when you're working in an object. So I got to go fix all these to be like actual object here. There. Say that. Now we try it, and we're getting closer. Oh, it is. I'm an idiot. Input data already is a object. because I just did all that stuff. It's not a string. It's a cool. So nothing happened. And this is good news, right? Nothing happened means that the script ran. I haven't actually called anything yet because these are functions. So what I want to do now is run the function. I'm going to do check metadata, and I'm going to pass it my data, which is input data here. I'm going to say input data. Now when we run it, nothing happens. Okay, what did I do wrong? All good. That's all good. Else print r.text. I can see if it's actually making a proper call. Errors. App ID header. Oh, I never called the headers. See? So here, what I need to do also is add the headers to my REST call. And the headers are up here. Remember, I saved it up here, and I just called them headers. So it's headers equals headers. Hit save. Now, run it. And boom, look at that. We got back our metadata programmatically in a command line from a Python little scripty guy. So now we're seeing, some of the information that we're getting back. We know our call's working, that sort of thing. Cool. What next? Okay, well, now we've got to evaluate this statement, right? Value true or value false are the only things that share no could be. But the first thing we got to do is see if that share no is even in the metadata values. And that's part of our check metadata statement here, right? So what I'm going to do is, instead of printing that out, I'm going to say, okay, if metadata values in, values in r.json, which basically says, if we go back and take a look at this, it says, hey, I got JSON back. Is this key in that JSON? So I want to look for that first. And if that is in there, if share no in, oh, wait. I gotta iterate this, don't I? Ugh. Because I can do that. If I'm done. Okay, I can do that in metadata values, right? Because our JSON's a JSON object. I'm going to look inside that key right there and see if share no is in there. And then in here, it's going to be do stuff. Else print no metadata field found that we care about, exiting, and then I'm just going to return false, because I'm gonna later use this as a true false method. So I'm just going to say, hey, is this true or not? And then up here, I'm going to say print no values found at all in successful response, exiting, and return false yet again. So now the next thing we got to do is we found out if this share number or share no is in our little block here. And then we have to iterate through the field values to see if they're there, right? So if we found it, now we've got field values. And this, you'll see these little brackets. That tells you that it's a list, right, at this point, which means that there could be multiple values in here potentially for any metadata field. So we need to go in and look through all those values. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to say for value, which basically assigns a value in our little for loop here from the outputs of this, for value in r.json metadata values and share no. Is that right? Yeah, there. Oh, no. field values. And what this is going to do is, right now we're only getting one back, but because this is a list, it tells us there could be multiple. So we're going to look through all of them, essentially. Is my mic cutting out? Whoever said I've got a robot coding voice, or is that just what I sound like to you guys? That would be kind of hilarious. So we're gonna go in here, and now we have those values, and I'm gonna say if value equals true, and here we're going to do something in a second, else return false. Because all we care about in this case is if the value is true, right? Our whole goal here is to look at this little field that only admins can put information into. And if it's not true, we don't need to do anything. We can just leave and continue on. But if it is true, this is where we start to do something, right? So, and right now, I'm just going to do a little print, and I'm going to say it is true, right? Just so that we can run this now. And if we go back and run our script again, did something wrong somewhere. Okay. And this is where you, if you want to do this right, I normally highly recommend you either learn how a debugger works, which I barely know how they work, or you actually start logging things. But we're going to do it the beginner way, which is we're just going to print statements all over the place that show us what's going on at the different places, because I've given it a lot of opportunities to run away and with all these if statements, and we might just be looking at data incorrectly, right? So I'm going to say print print JSON dumps r.json for group, and then see real quick. Okay, cool. So that we got into that section, right? Because it ran this bit of code. That if statement was correct. So now we got to go into the next one and see what's going on and say print JSON. Whoops. JSON dumps are JSON metadata values, because now I just want to see if it's evaluating that right. And same thing again, indent. I don't care about sorting keys. I'm being lazy. Run it again, and now we can see, okay, we got our initial one there, and then it did give me my share no one, right? So it came back there. So this part worked. So now we're in this little area here. So I'm going to say print value, because I just want to see what the values are that it's finding. Ah, here we go. So this is why, and it's something relatively simple I just overlooked. Inside that list, this is actually a dictionary. So I actually, value in this case is this full dictionary, value equals true, and that was the problem. I didn't want to check if value equals true. I wanted to check if value equals true. I know that's a little bit confusing, but and if I run this again now, it is true, right? Because I took that dict, and now I can clean up some of that ugly stuff that I made just to make to debug a little bit here. All right, cool. So now I know that is true. If I go up here and actually let's go into Iconik and show you how this works. If I go to that metadata field now and go to our sharing and turn it off, update that metadata, and now I go back and run my script again. Boom. Oh, I didn't give a, it is here. Else, if value else, and it is false, just so you can trust me here. Boom, it is false. So now our little program is looking into Iconik and figuring out what that metadata value is and allowing us to start doing things against it. So the next thing I want to do in this case is I don't care about printing that information out. What I'm actually going to do is build another function which deletes the share at this point. So I'm just going to call this delete share, and then I'm going to pass the webhook into it. So all the same information gets tossed over to it, and we can parse that out again. I haven't actually written that yet, so let's collapse some of these and start working on writing that. Actually, no, we just want to return true here. I lied. True here. We are going to write that function, but I don't want to actually have that logic be locked into that function. So we're going to do delete share. We're going to toss it the webhook as well. And we're going to start with our requests right away. If we get to the point where we're going to run this, all we're going to do is run a very simple requests delete. We're going to do r equals requests.delete Iconic URL plus, and then what the heck was it? It's in my my little notepad here, right? Share. And paste that there and format it right. So this is going to assets. Object ID is going to same thing it was up above. Plus be lazy, copy and paste. Boom. And shares, and then the share ID is going to be plus. That is webhook. And I think it's just the object ID. Yep. Object ID. So, and then the only other thing we want to do is say if r.status equals double equals, not make the same mistake twice. Back to my docs real quick. Whoops. Go take a look at that share and see what our return codes are. Share. The shares. Yeah, so delete for the share ID. And we're looking for a 204, which means that the delete happens successfully. So we go back here and say that r.says equals 204. Return true. True. Come on, spell it right. Why do you keep doing it? True. Else. Return false. Which just tells us that the delete didn't work. Okay? So now we've got, really quickly, all the kind of basic logic we need to kill shares if the metadata field isn't set properly. I'm going to save this really quickly, and we're going to add a little bit of actual program logic down here. So we're going to say if check metadata, which basically says if the return on this function that we wrote, why is that? If the return on this function that we wrote up here is true, do the stuff in here. If it's not true, don't do the stuff in here. And then I'm going to say delete share and pass the same webhook to it. Okay? Actually, I'm going to say if delete share, print all good. Else, print problem deleting. And then I'll make one more else statement for the top if. Else, print metadata didn't have flag. We don't care. Exiting. All right. So now, if we hop back over to Iconic, here's our little webhooks, or our shares here. If I run my script, and if I did everything right, metadata didn't have, because I changed it. Sure. So this is good news. It worked, but it didn't work the way I wanted to. So if I hit update now, and this is cannot be shared, now. And now I run my script. Delete share, name, webhook not defined. Okay, what did I do wrong? Oh, that's why. No, input data. Sorry. And you got to spell delete right if you want module to actually delete. It should be if our status code. Oh, yeah, you're right. Thanks, Michael. You caught that one. And then you got to spell delete right. The tell is not the right word. All right, cool. Now, hopefully, boom, problem deleting. All right, what did I do wrong? I'm going to print out these guys really quickly just to see if I'm getting the right data passed to my function. My guess is that I'm not. That looks right. Did it delete? No. Ah, correct. See, there's also so many smart people in chat telling me things that are smart. I didn't authenticate a call. I didn't send the headers. So headers, headers. Or I was trying to delete something with an open call, and obviously Iconic's going to say you can't do that. So that's why I was problem deleting. Run it now. Oop, okay. Thought that was it. What are we getting back here? .404. Did I use bad info? V1. Oh, yeah, no, V1 assets, data object ID, data. Object ID is the asset ID. Shares, and then the object ID here is the share ID. Do I not have that share ID anymore? Did I already delete this one, potentially? Look. So this is why I was telling you earlier, if you want to kind of cheat when you're working with Iconic, I'm going to kill all the network, close this tab really quickly, close this tab, kill all the network activity that happened in Iconic, and I'm going to open my network tab, and that's going to make the API call for the UI, and then I'm going to actually see the list of the shares that came back and make sure that I'm on the right thing. So 005E, yep, that's good. And where's the object or the actual ID? ID, and then okay, I'm doing something stupid. Let's go back and take a look at my URL. Should it? Should not. That shouldn't matter, but we'll take a look at that. Technically, I don't think it needs to end with the slash either. Get rid of that. Probably leading 404. Does want the X at the end, a slash at the end. All right. Plus that. Still a problem deleting. It's the right stuff. Oh, no, it's a 404. I bet you I know what it is. Let's take a look at the ACLs on this object. There's a very real possibility that the person that I've got all the authentication running against actually can't see it. Is that possible? Access controls. Yeah. Groups. Yeah, that would make it. So metadata manager. which was the group, and then these guys can have read access and whatever. We'll give them all rights to this particular clip. Okay. All right, let's see what we got going on here. I'm just going to print this out too. Print. Trying this. Plus, boom. Save. You run it. All right, take a look here. Iconic API. Oh, that's why, I think, right? I didn't, I'm missing a chunk of the API URL. Right, it's slash assets slash v1 assets. That's why. Assets slash v1. Right? Yes. I think. Whoops. Go back here. Again. All good. There we go. So now we have it working. And because I had a typo, that's where we got to. If we hop back into Iconik now and refresh, look at that. Share's gone. So now our little program technically works. We took information that a webhook sent, we used that as the input, and then we just basically use that to manipulate the Iconik API to actually delete this thing. And that's all well and good, but we want to have some notification that happens with this as well. And so where we're gonna go now is use Slack to notify when a share that is restricted gets created and then tries to get shared out, I guess. You know what I'm trying to say. Yeah. All right. So let's see here. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go look at stuff I wrote a while ago, because I can't remember how the heck to talk to Slack, but it's not that tough. I'm going to go look at a login as a different account here. I'm going to steal some code I already wrote. I don't have permissions to view my own page? I don't think so. Need some music too. We'd be listening to today. What the heck? Okay, there we go. Now we're working. There's a couple of things I want to steal from this little bit of code that I wrote before. First one is the JSON that Slack wants to post into a channel. And I'm just going to grab that and, again, paste it into my little notes pad over here. Say Slack post, channel post. Just so I have it for later. The other thing I want to do really quickly is take a look at... I think I just post that to a unique endpoint. Yeah, super easy. So now I just got to go to Slack and attach that. So let's go to Slack. Move that off screen just in case there's privileged information that you youngins shouldn't see. I haven't sworn yet, but I probably did in the Slack. Okay, so I've made, just so you guys can see this too, I've made a private channel here within Slack that I'm going to post all of this stuff to. And what I need to do is, let's see, Slack dev developer. And APIs and web API. Oh, I got that on the wrong page. And I need to create I think I need to create a webhook, if I remember correctly, on the actual channel. It's been a while since I've done that. This is where Googling comes in. Channel. Tutorials. No, we don't want to do that. Not website. Maybe I just do it this way. Let's use good old Google. REST API to post to Slack channel. See what Google tells me. There it is. Right? That's okay. Pretty much what I did before, and now I got to figure out how to get the channel ID, right? So not telling me that. Not helpful. Okay. Here we go. Got to register our application. Okay. Who am I logged in as? Create a new app. We'll call this share restriction log, and here create the app. And then I want to say, post messages from sources into Slack, turn on incoming webhooks, add webhook to a workspace, and then I'm going to look for Mike's private dev channel, hit allow. Cool. And now I've got my URL to start posting stuff to Slack. So this is the little URL that I've got to this little channel I've put together. So we're going to hop back to my notepad, paste that in really quickly. And what we're going to do is just do a test post really quickly and write a function that see if it works. So hop back into Virtual Studio here, or VS Code, and I'm going to make a new function, def post to Slack, and then webhook. Just because I'm going to send the same information into it, I might need to use within there. And in this case, we're just going to straight up post to it. So we're going to do a r equals requests dot. Actually, let's go back to the docs and see. Post. Requests.post, and paste our URL in. Headers equals accept, no, content type JSON, right? They told me to do. Yeah, content type application JSON, and then the data is going to be my actual post. So hop back here. Cool, and then data equals, actually, you know what? I'm just going to pass it a message, and then that way I can use it in other places if I want. Data equals message. Cool, should be all good. And then if our status code not equal 200, print something went wrong with Slack. Okay. And what we're going to do really quickly is I'm just going to comment out all my logic so far because we're just going to test this in our script. And I'm going to do post to Slack. And then inside there, I'm actually going to just copy and paste this. I'm going to use my Slack template here. And put this right above. Slack. Save, run our script. And let's check our Slack channel. Bingo. So we have now just successfully posted information to the Slack channel from our little script as well. So now we've successfully gotten information from Iconik, talked back to Iconik, done some stuff, and then posted in some more. So now what we want to do is, obviously this is just basic info here, and we want to change some of this, right? So we're going to say, first off, warning, share item, or restricted asset illegal shared. And I'll put the item ID in there, and I'm going to use that as the title as well. And I'm going to use the item URL as well, which we'll come back and format some of this a little bit later. And then I'm also going to say user. Title is going to be user, and value is going to be username. Or we can just say user right now. Cool. That's all good. So that's going to flag Slack and tell us which user it is. So now the last thing we got to do before we start like implementing all this stuff is use Iconik to figure out which user shared that particular item. Because we can see that this works now. If I go and run my little script again with those little changes, get warning, restricted access illegally shared, and it's got some variables in there and user and that sort of stuff. So I want to go now and figure out basically, we can get rid of this now because we don't need it. Move this up top because we will probably use that later. Just our general little bits of info. We need to figure out how to get that information from our post. So let's go take a look back at our JSON that got created originally. And you can see here's the ID, blah, 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 date created, owner ID, right? So that's the user in Iconik that actually shared the asset. And what we want to do in this case is figure out who that owner is and post it into the Slack channel, and maybe put more info in there too. Maybe we want to put in their email address, their full name, that sort of thing. Because if I'm a super admin, I want to figure out who it is that's sharing this stuff out. That's where I want to go with it. So we get to use another corner of the Iconik API at this point. If I hop over, we can actually close this now. We don't even open anymore. Close that. We can close that. So I'm going to hop into the API docs, and this time I'm going to go to users and kind of take a look through here and see, okay, v1 users get, we probably want get by user ID, right? Yeah, so there we go, get by user ID. So we can try that out and hop back over to our little example, copy that, paste it in as the user ID, and we can see all the information about this particular user, right? We can see first name and email and that sort of thing, whoever it is that that created this, what their rules are associated with it. We could even grab their photo if we wanted to and post it into the Slack channel as a link. You know, it really doesn't matter. We've got a lot of different options there. So what I'm going to do now is, yet again, copy all of this just so I have it as a template for me to kind of snoop around with later. Throw it down below here. I'm going to get rid of all this crap so you guys don't, because we're not going to use any of that. And let's see if there's anything else in here that we just don't need to use so we can get rid of it. Cool. So now we can see that there's some information that comes back with that call that we can then extract out and use in our message. So let's hop back into VS Code, and let's make or into our script. Let's make a new function here that is def get user info. And we're going to pass it the webhook again because that's the info that we got that we are going to use to look this up. And we are going to say r equals requests.get Iconik URL plus users /v1/users / plus, and now we're going to go webhook. And what is it? I already forgot what it was. It was in the webhook. It was data owner ID. Oops. Data and owner ID. Okay, cool. And then we got to pass the headers again because this is an authenticated call. Cool. And then if our status code equals 200, right now we're just going to return, or we're just going to print out our JSON dumps r.json indent equals 4. Cool. And then what we're going to do is run our get user info with input data. Make sure it's working properly. Go run our script again. Okay, I did something wrong. I grabbed the wrong endpoint. It is users v1 users. Need the trailing slash. Oh, oops. Forgot the plus. All right, so now we get to figure out why things are going wrong. So I'm just going to print r.text, which just is going to be the error code that Iconik gives me back. Errors, access denied. Because my API key user does not have access to my user in the system. So we're going to fix that really quickly temporarily. I'm just going to go here under users and then go to my actual user here, go to access rights, add permissions, and then my metadata manager is going to be able to read my info. Cool. And this is a hacky way of doing it. Normally, you'd have a higher level permissioned person associated with this, but I didn't want to stream out and have an app key going for, a super admin on my domain. So hopefully you guys are cool with that. So now, if we go back and run this again, access denied again. That should work. Maybe it's a role thing. Let's see. Go to groups and our metadata manager group and look for users. Yep, missing the read. Did not have rights. All right. Really? All right, let's see. I'm curious as to why I've got access denied for this user when they can read users and have rights to the user. Let's see. Let's hop over here. Obviously, this, just for some added information here, I am running all of this as a super admin, and it's using a temporary key, like it's an auth token that's based on the login that I have. So it's a little disingenuous if you're not going to use that same key when you're actually developing against the system to do it this way, because with me being a super admin, everything always works no matter what. All right. So what did I do wrong here? So if access is denied, that's got to mean that it's got to be roles based, right? Either got to be roles or the rights. I don't need to be able to write users to be able to see that. Whoops. And that use. Yeah, so that did work as that user. See if I use my, probably are going to get the same results back here, but if I go and grab my app ID and token that I'm actually using for the script, now I got an error access denied. Okay, so it's definitely something to do with my ACLs and roles permissions for this particular group for that user. So let's go dive a little deeper here and see what could be happening there. So we got, I don't need to be able to read groups, I don't believe. We'll give that access anyway. That possibly, is it possibly a cache issue? Nope. I'm still having issues here. Very strange. I'm gonna give this user a little more access very temporarily. Let's see, and yeah. So the user that I am. Oh, you know what? That user may be a standard user. Ah, we probably are. Okay, okay, we're on to something here. Let's go take a look at our users. Joe Producer was the user I used, and he is a standard user. Therefore, he is limited from doing this because that's essentially not allowed by him. So I'm going to go in here and kick Joe over to a power user and hit update. Hopefully, bingo, everything worked. So it's always something, guys, right? It's always something. But fun to kind of track down what it is that could be possibly wrong here. But now our script is working and I got back all the information. So I want email, I want phone, first name and last name, because I want to see all this information in my Slack message. So the response that I get back from get user info, what I'm going to do is actually return r.json, which is going to give me all the information back at the end of this. So essentially, when I run that, I can pass that back to a variable. So I can say my user info equals get user info, right? And that's now going to be a JSON object that comes back, and my user info, well, what was it? First name, right? Email. I'm just going to do print email, :space, there. And we're going to do this for first name. I think it's first name is the key. Underscore name. Print last name plus my user info last name. All right, so now by rights, if I've done this properly, we run our script now, I can see all the info that popped out. Cool. So now we don't need to be printing any of our JSON anymore. We can get rid of that line up there because that was just printing out to help us debug. Now we got another nice little handy function here. And now what we have to do is take this information and then wrap it into our Slack message, right? So we've got a Slack message up here. It's a little template that we have, and we want to format that and replace some things. So first of all, let's make a few more fields. So we can say name, and we can do F name and L name so that that's sorted. And then we'll make another field in here, and we will call this title email. Right, and value going to be a variable that I pass in, email. And this is a place where probably in Python 3 I could do this smarter than what I'm doing it, because I'm awful at string formatting in Python. And short false, because we want that to be easy to see. And then, for right now, we'll just leave that. Maybe we can make this a little bit prettier later. Cool. So we should have all the information we need now in our little template. It says, so you can actually use the user's basic endpoint without authentication, but you can only get the name and email with that. So if we wanted to get more in-depth information, and with this being an administrative function, we might actually want to do that at some point. So, all right. Now we've got all this kind of sorted up. We can get rid of these because we know that function's working. Get rid of that. And what we want to do is do our post to Slack. Oh, we first want to format our message. I always forget how the hell to do. I'm going to go back to my old code because I actually did it there. No. Cloud. This is another thing that's I do all the time is steal from my own code. So if you are, getting into this, keep everything around, keep it organized in a pretty good place, because you're going to forget this if it's not your full-time job from time to time. And when you do that, hey, guess what? You're really going to love having that stuff kind of available to you to do at another time. All right, so let's take a look at my source here. And what I do, so where did I do my formatting? Do status. Yeah, so I used the template library, it looks like here. Yep, from string import template. And then I did this little safe substitute line here. Those are the only two lines I used to actually make this work. So what I can do is grab these little bits here. And I gotta import from string import template. And now I've got my Slack template up here, right? So I'm going to create a message, and then I'm going to call this, formatted message. And then I'm going to go through and find these little guys here are the variables that I had up here. And I'm going to split this to the right really quickly, so it's easy to see that. I don't have status anymore, but I've got f name, I've got item URL still around, I've got l name, and I've got email. And now I've got to parse out from our JSON that we just did in our get user info method. I'm just going to replace these values, right? So first name is going to be equal to, first we're going to user info equals get user info and our webhook. Because that's going to give us back a JSON object here in user info that has all the info in it. And then I'm going to go here and say user info, and is going to be first underscore name. And item URL is going to be https://app.iconik.io/assets/ I don't have that info yet, do I? Oh, I do. I do have it in my incoming webhook. So or not webhook, input data, sorry. Input data. And that is, the heck is it? Data and object ID. And what I'm basically doing, what I'm doing here is I'm building that URL. So if you just go to Iconik, no, not After Effects, no, we'll kill everything. If you go to Iconik and go to any given asset within Iconik, you'll see that the URL for it is simply app.iconik.io/asset/ the UUID of that particular item. So that's what I'm using here, and I'm just kind of formulating that right here in a variable, which is ugly, but it will work. And then I'm going to grab user info, last name, and email here. Well, last name is that. Last or name and email is going to be email. All right, so now I can close this here. Get rid of that. Now I can try post Slack formatted message. And if this works properly, run it, which it failed because I did something wrong with it. Oh. Yeah. And let's take a look at Slack. Let's see if that worked. Look at that. Warning, restricted asset, illegally shared item ID. Oh, okay, so I've got, that's wrong. Let's see if the link worked, though. Nope, so it didn't parse out the item ID properly. What did I do wrong there? Let's see. All right, so let's just do this really quickly. Print what I was going to try to make the item ID. Oops. Hear that. That back. See if that works. That's correct. So what did I? Item URL. Oh, that's why. Because item URL is what I want. Item URL. This should be. Ah, there we go. Because item ID is different than the item URL. So I'm still not sure why this didn't work. Very strange. Oh, because it's assets. So here we go. Another fine example of a simple little typo. I put a typo in my Slack message and it said assets instead of asset. So I got to get rid of that S right there. And then I got to add one more variable in here, down here. We can get rid of this because we figured out our problem. Assets, and then object ID, and then I just need this as, I think I just called that item D. That. Yes, item ID. Okay, so now if we run this one more time, this, hop over to Slack, boom, we've got the name, illegal share of that particular item, all the info we want. I click it, it takes me not to the item because what if I did not delete the S. I deleted it in the wrong place. Oops. That's good. Asset. Bingo. Try this one more time. Go look at Slack there, click the link, boom, takes us to the right place. So we now have all the logic we need to actually complete this entire process now. So now it's just wrapping it up into a little bit more intelligent of a wrapper. That means, building the business logic around it and that sort of thing, and then converting that into a cloud function, which actually isn't too hard because we've used the data that's being sent in as our source from day one. So first things first, let's build this, or go back to our code and build our actual full stack business logic. So we're going to get rid of, or collapse some of this stuff just so it's easier to see. And first thing we wanted to do, first we were checking metadata, but we want to go higher than that. So we want to go check validity, right? That's our first thing to do, because that checks to make sure it's coming from the right domain ID. That was the very first little function we wrote an hour or so ago. And then I want to check the metadata for validity. And then if it's deleted, say all good. Let's put some more info in here. Deleted share ID plus input data slash ID, I think, actually, right, for the object ID and then data object ID, right? Yeah, object ID, the actual data share, or the share itself. Let's see here. So. Object ID plus for item plus data data do that right? Data. Yes. Okay. So that's all correct. We're just making our printouts a little bit better here. Cool. Okay, so that's all good. And then we also want to, before we do that, we want to post it to Slack, right? Because if this delete fails for some reason, we were going to want to see that, but we also want to let the admins know. So we're going to do our post to Slack, and we got to format all of our messaging info. So we're basically going to take this block up here, cut it, and then paste it right in here, and make sure it's lined up right. Okay, and maybe we want to let us know to print attempting to post to Slack, and there we go. Oop. Block that over too many. Good thing I caught that. This isn't there. There we go. All right, so we attempt to block that. We go get the user info from Iconik. We create our message from our template. We then format that message appropriately with all the information we have. We post it to Slack, and then we try to delete the share, and then we notify if the delete failed. And theoretically, we could create another Slack message here and notify in Slack if there was a problem deleting this, right? Oh, did I screw up the metadata URL earlier? Was I in the wrong function when I did that? Yes. Assets. Good call. I would have never remembered that. Cool. So now we're checking the validity. We're checking the metadata. We're going to attempt to post to Slack that there was an error. That's this little block right here, right? And then we're going to try to delete. And we're saying that as an if because we want to make sure that we notify if there was a problem. And then if the metadata didn't have a flag, we're done. So this is pretty much the entire business logic tree for the entire function at this point. So let's try a new share and see if it works both times. So what we're going to do is hop back over to Iconik, and we'll use the same clip again. And actually, we'll pull up our webhook.site as well, so we got that ready. I'm going to go and let's see what our metadata is. Share restriction. Okay. So right now the share restriction is on. So when I send this share, it should get automatically, once we run our script, it should get deleted. Send it, hit go. All right, so what that did was that created our webhook over here. There it is. I'm going to take that new webhook that I just got, copy it, throw it back in as our input data here. And I got to remember, I got to fix a couple of the non-Pythonic things in here. These false and none, false, false, true. Okay. And now if we run this, boom, attempting, trying this, blah, 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 all good, deleted share, everything worked. And if we look in Slack, warning, restricted asset illegally shared, blah, blah, blah. I can go to the asset, see what it is. I can see that the share is actually gone already. This was the one from a couple hours ago. But I know exactly who the user was that attempted to did that share, and I can now go scold them or fire them or do whatever I want to do. And the share link that went out, because the share link did go out in the mail, if we go take a look at that, so here's the one, and you can see that it was date stamped 140, so it was just sent a minute ago. If I click that, boom, share's not available. So our system did what it was supposed to do. It took the file, removed it before the user could have even possibly gotten to that share, and notified our admin channel of the entire thing. So now our logic's working. Now we got to set it up so it actually works automatically, so we're not just running this silly thing by hand every time we get new information in, right? So that's going to use a cloud function. So what I'm going to do is hop over to Google Cloud again, my Google Cloud console. And I'm going to go into Cloud Functions here. And I'm going to make a new function. And I'm going to call this share approval store. And going to say does not require authentication in this case, because Iconik's webhook is not going to make an authenticated call. It's just going to post that webhook. Hit next. And I'm going to change this to Python, because that's what we've been using this whole time to do all of our work. And something interesting happens here, right? So it predefines all of the kind of variables that you need. And what this functionally is a Flask endpoint. If you've never worked with Flask before, that's totally okay. It actually tells you the docs and everything like that right in here. But admittedly, this gets a little confusing if you've never used it before. The idea is that this request JSON right here is essentially the JSON block that got sent as an actual Python JSON object. And the def is going to be what we're going to wrap our business logic around, because that's what's actually going to run. So we're basically going to kind of copy and paste all of our functions in here that we built, our definitions, and we're going to wrap this little guy in a new function and then pass the JSON that gets handed by the webhook to it. In the interim, though, I am going to take a very quick bio break. We'll kick it over and turn on a little bit of tunes in the background while I do that, and I'll be back in just a few minutes. Let's find some good break music for developing. All right, I will be back shortly.
You look at me like I
All right, guys, I am back. And I actually played the wrong album. I'm gonna play this album. You might be able to hear it in the background. I don't know where my dog went. She was hanging out with me all up until I started streaming, and then she was like, "I don't want to be around this. I'm not a nerd. Leave me alone." I feel like we're getting pretty close, and it is a Friday, so I did bring a beer, so that if we get this all working, I will crack it, and I hope you will all crack one with me as well, regardless of your time zone. But not until we're done. So let's kick it back into screen share. There we go. Cool. So now we are back in our little cloud function here, and I'm going to actually just, instead of using hello world, because frankly, that's not what I want to use, I'm going to just call this run audit, because that's kind of what it's doing. And I'm going to change the entry point up here to run audit as well. That means that when this cloud function runs, what is the first thing that it actually which function does it actually run within here? So I'm going to get rid of a lot of the stuff that I don't actually need in here. Tab that over. And the joy of Google Cloud Functions also is that they take for frickin' ever to deploy. So when we screw up here, there's going to be a lot of sitting around. So I'm totally down for, like, you guys can chat me up or ask silly questions or whatever while we're sitting here waiting for this stuff to deploy. We're not quite there yet. So next thing I'm going to do is hop back to my code here and expand kind of all my functions and start just kind of pasting them in. Right. So I'm going to grab my business logic down here, and that's going into our run function here. And I'm going to bump that over. And we're going to change this to input data. Okay, so basically what this is doing is we used input data everywhere within our script to be the JSON object that got passed from the webhook. And request.getJSON, that's saying, hey, when this cloud function gets called, return the JSON object to that. And this way, if I rename it input data, guess what? I don't have to rename anything or do any of these kind of commands that I was doing. I also caught that I did not call that properly. Maybe I'll fix it back here as well, because I'm actually surprised it worked with no call in there. And then now I'm going to expand all my functions, and paste them in as well. And I'm just going to collapse these so it's easier to see what we're working with here. And then the other thing I'm going to do is grab all of our variables that were up at the top that we used, that were our little shortcuts. So slide up to the top. We're going to grab our import calls. We're going to grab our app ID, headers, URL, that, and our Slack template here. We're going to need that as well, because obviously we're using that to format down further. And hop over there, paste that at the top. And then the last thing we need to do here is you can see that I've used the requests library, and that's not a standard library within Python. So I need to go into my requirements here and type in requests, because that's going to tell this cloud function to make that available within the environment, because these are little tiny mini environments with no actual compute behind them, so to speak. You're not in control of the stack. I mean, there's obviously compute behind them. And now, if we've done this correctly, we're going to cross our fingers. We're going to hit the deploy button. And if we've done everything right, it'll work. Odds are it's not going to work, because it never works the first time. I don't think I've never been lucky enough to actually do the first time run compile. And if it does happen, man, the beer's getting cracked now, for sure. All right. So while we wait for this beautiful little function to go, people still watching? It says we got 18 people still watching, which is cool for watching somebody write software. How's everybody's Friday going? You having a good time? Interesting? How's the weather in wherever you might be? Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think we're getting, holy crap. It compiled on the first run. All right. That's, woo. Okay. Said we were doing it. We're doing it. There we go. Some fine Michigan lager here. We got the Bell's Lager of the Lakes, Bohemian Pilsner. If you're a fan of like refreshing, effervescent but flavorful lagers, this is the way to go. All right, now let's see if it actually works. So what we've done is deployed this, and you'll notice now there's this trigger tab, and the trigger tab is what we're going to replace our webhook with. But we can do it by hand really quickly right now. So we still have it pointing at our webhook.site, right? That's still happening. So I'm going to hop over back to Iconik again, and we can close this window. We don't need it. Or hop back over to Iconik, and we're going to make yet another share. Share it to me again. Cool. Hit send. Bada boom. Share link goes out. If we hop back to our webhook.site within a few seconds here, we should see, yep, there's our new one that just came in, 152. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger this by hand just so that I can kind of see what feedback I get in the Google console. I'll hop back over to my Google Cloud function, wherever that was, right here. And I'm going to go to this testing panel, and then I can just paste that JSON in here, because this is basically emulating what the webhook actually would send. I click go, and it said recommended action. Okay, so it didn't work. Damn it, I opened the beer too. So missing one required positional object webhook. So I probably, somewhere in the source here, had something called webhook, but didn't actually have it called webhook. Let's go take a look at this. Well, let's just do a find for webhook and see where I used it. Okay, that's good. That's in scope. That's in scope. Where did I use it out of scope? What did I do wrong? Okay, let's run that again just so I can get the error message again. Okay. Error. Function terminated. Recommended action details. Check validity. Missing one required argument. Webhook. What did I do? So right. Recommended. All right, let's go look at the actual logs here. See if it gave me a crash report. This takes forever too, unfortunately. And this is primarily the reason why I do all this stuff outside of the kind of Lambda world first. All right, so here we go. Yeah, it's still the same thing. Required one positional argument. Check validity. Do I pass? Did I do something silly like pass it when it doesn't need to be there? Check validity. Oh. Yeah, I didn't actually pass it. Whoops. That was a pretty easy one to check. Right. Yeah, I've got a KBS in the fridge, by the way, so I can go crack that bad boy open if it actually does work. I've got an entire window full of barrel-aged stouts in my fridge. All right, so let's edit this function real quickly. So what I did here, if you guys are noticing, the webhook check validity function requires me to pass data into it, but I didn't do that in run audit. You can see I called the thing, but I didn't actually pass the data to it, and it was telling me, "Hey, dude, I'm expecting information here, and you haven't provided it." So just changing that really quickly. So all we need to do, hopefully, hit redeploy, sit around again. wait for the joys of Google Cloud Functions to compile. Oh, hey. Buddy got a fresh box from FCP Euro for his M5. Good stuff, man. He might even be watching this. I don't know. All right. So close. You guys like watching paint dry? It's my favorite thing. Come on, come on, come on, come on. All right. So now we're in there. We're gonna run it by hand again. And go to our testing again and paste in this. Hit test. I thought that's what I just fixed. It actually, oh, I've run into this with Google Cloud where it takes a second for it to more or less resync. So that could have been a false negative there. Not gonna. There we go. Completed. Okay. Logs fetching. If we go to our Slack message, look at that. 157. Illegally shared object, and that one came from our Google Cloud function. There's the thing, and we can see that it's gone now. The share is gone. So the very last thing to do here to make sure this all actually works is hop back into our Cloud function. Right there. And grab the trigger here, which is the URL. And we're just going to swap that out for our webhook and Iconik. So we were pointing at our webhook.site just so that we had all our testing information. But now I'm going to go to settings and webhooks. And where the heck is it? Assets, update shares. There we go. Create shares. And I'm going to edit that webhook. I'm just going to paste in the Cloud function now, which seems like it didn't copy properly. Copy link. That looks more right. And hit update. And now, in theory, we're doing this right. I'm going to pull Slack up here. And I'm going to go to an item in Iconik. We'll just go to this other one that we haven't been using so far. Whoops. So we see this has no shares associated with it yet. And as far as our share restriction metadata, this can be shared. No problem. So if we do this right, we'll share this out. And say, hit send. Share gets created. If we hop back over to Slack, no problems, no big deal. We'll wait a second to make sure that it actually lets the whole Cloud function run, but by rights, no big deal there. We go to a different asset now and say, all right, let's go to this one right here. And I go to my share metadata and turn that on. Update. Cool. Now the metadata is saved. And I go to share. And again, I'll send it to somebody random. There we go. Send it to Craig, normal guy. Hit send. Hop back over to Slack. If this works properly, because this is a restricted asset, our webhook should pick up and actually remove it. All right. So what's going on there? Do not have success. We did not get a notification from that. Let's go take a look at our Cloud function and look at the logs on it. Okay, so 1357. It does not look like, okay, newer ones yet. Good, deleted share. That's the first one. This is the second one that we ran that actually didn't have any sort of error with it. This one, you can see it said all good, deleting share. That was the one we ran by hand a few minutes ago. But sometimes these logs take a second to update too. Is yeah, actually let's take a look. Maybe I copied or the trigger wrong. Hop back. Look. Setting webhooks. Oh yeah, it's definitely not right. It's trying to search Google. It's sending our webhook to Google as a search. That looks right. Okay, update. Refresh, just make sure it took. It did take. All right. Try this again. Go to the video of my dog sleeping and share that yet another time. Still has the restriction on. Hit go. Hop over to Slack. See what happens. Bingo. We have it working. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's all she wrote. We have just built in. That's 2 hours. It wasn't too bad actually. I was expecting it to take way longer than that. Our entire rapid prototype from the get-go. So I think we've accomplished everything we wanted, right? New metadata view that is limited to admins. New share being made that worked as expected, and we're listening to that. Checked all that sort of stuff, removed the share, and then shot that information over to Slack. And obviously, you could take this a whole layer higher. You could do things like have a little tiny data store that flags if that user has shared something illegally multiple times, and then you could use the API to disable that user's account automatically if they've done that, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, hey, cheers guys. And we'll take it from there. And I don't have Battlefield installed on my laptop. I don't know if I have any games installed on my laptop. Now, you'd have to sit around and watch me play like solitaire or something like that. That's not very. Maybe for the next one of these, I'll pipe the PlayStation in, and then that way, if we finish early because everything works great, we can take it from there. Um, yeah. So here's the other thing. We want to do these more often, and I would really love to get more ideas from you guys. So anybody that was watching this, uh, dude, feel free to send me an email, post in the Slack channel. We're gonna post this up on YouTube as well, so that everybody can see it and go back and reference it and try it themselves. But if you have ideas on things you'd like to see us try to do, I want to do these about once a month, maybe more frequently if we have a ton of feedback on them and lots of things that people want to see. But the goal is let's see how we can glue things together, teach you guys how to do it, and we're going to start from scratch and figure it out as we go. I literally had not touched a line of this stuff before we fired up the stream today, and you could see we had errors quite a bit and things that I screwed up on and that sort of thing. So yeah, man, I really appreciate everybody joining the stream. And again, if you guys have anything you need, a lot of you guys have my email already. If you don't, just pop it into the YouTube comments, pop it into the chat, and we'll take it from there. And if you guys have not signed up for Twitch, you can subscribe to the channel and then add notifications. We're not going to be doing this more than probably once every couple of weeks, so it's not going to be blowing up your phone or whatever. But that way, if you miss the LinkedIn notification or our tweets or whatever, you'll actually get a ping and you can hop on and hang out with me. So I appreciate it, guys. Have a great day. We're going to end the stream now and take it from there. Bye.